Well, hello, and welcome to the Practice Forward podcast. This is Owen Bush. I'm your host today. I'm joined today by John Fry, who is the principal at Nexus Creative Design. They are experts in civil planning, adaptive reuse, a lot of really interesting topics here focused in upstate New York, Hudson Valley. John, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm really looking forward to this discussion or chat.
Me too. Yeah. And there's a lot of things that there's a lot of things I would love to learn about. I'm your host, Owen Bush. We're sponsored today by Scan to Plan. Scan to Plan sort of solves the pre-design process so that you can focus on design as creative professionals. So, as someone who works in this pre-design phase, I'm always really interested in what happens downstream from the modeling from the 3D and upstream from it. A lot of these really interesting adaptive reuse projects and stuff, I love to get into more detail with folks like John.
I'm happy to share.
Well, welcome. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would begin sharing one notion, right? In I don't know how you would characterize the era of building scanning to create existing conditions and then create a tool for work beyond. But for us, in my awareness, I would say we're maybe 10 years into this era, and probably 7 or 8 years into it really becoming a ubiquitous tool in our profession, right? I mean, there was, just like any technology, there was what I would call an exotic period. Nobody really understood what the scanning process is or might yield. And we, like many professionals, incrementally introduced it into our work, and the more we learned, the more we were enamored about what a tool it is, and for a lot of practical reasons, but even in terms of nuance, and especially obviously related to adaptive reuse in existing buildings, it became a voila moment.
Right.
Was right.
In case you're wondering, folks, John is talking about scan to BIM technology in general, which is involving LiDAR scanning of existing buildings and then translating that into existing conditions documentation, whether that's in BIM or in CAD. So this is a service that is, my company as well as many others offer this service for the pre-design phase so that, as I mentioned earlier, folks can focus on design. It also has the great advantage of having the point cloud, which becomes sort of a central source of truth for the project that goes all the way through the coordination, all the way into the construction phase and all those things like that. So sorry to interrupt, John, just for
our modern tool that, right, this profession wasn't available really to, and it probably wasn't available at a reasonable scale and cost before the last 7 or 8 years, and now it's become almost a required tool, and a tool that clients are fully familiar with.
Right. Yeah, you see it all the time in RFPs now. They have language. I think for our company, it's great to be on the forefront of this and really starting to develop the language around standards, accuracy standards, as well as standards of represented geometry, especially at some of these higher historic preservation levels and things like that. BIM as a language has really been motivated, I think, more by new construction. And then having a language for existing buildings and historic buildings is something that we're all still developing together.
Exactly. And I was just going to add to that, right? I mean, if you think about this tool evolving and refining, and the refinements within the tool itself, and then within the dynamics of the consulting team who's using it, and the consulting team who's creating it, your notion of creating standards and gauges, and the dialogue between what you do and what we do becoming more refined. We've certainly seen that.
Oh, thanks.
We're kind of in that next plateau, I feel like, of learning how to leverage it to a higher degree.
Oh, I mean, I always say that the road to budget predictability is through good data, right? Schedule predictability, whether it's data that we provide or other kinds of data that you guys provide. If the data is solid, right, then you have predictability throughout the entire life cycle.
The better science, the better analysis, the better resolution.
Right. So, and it's an honor for us to be able to provide this foundation for people that is really validated, and that they can consider to be a central source of truth throughout the project. That's what I'm interested in. I hope we have a chance to talk about this later in terms of like how that central source of truth then kind of radiates through a project that goes all the way through the construction cycles and then into the life cycles of the building. Anyway, let's talk about Nexus, John. So
we feel like we're somewhat unique. Every firm feels like they have a unique niche. As it relates to our diversity of work, we're very diverse. We're in the planning space, and that planning space extends from smaller campus jobs to community planning. We're very much involved in that lane. We're also very much involved in community dialogue and community engagement, and that's directly linked to our planning work. And sometimes they're difficult to differentiate. I mean, we're doing both sometimes. Occasionally, we are solely on the public engagement side of the table. We're involved on the academic side of that table, often with an ongoing relationship with Pace Land Use Law Center. And then we have our traditional, what I think most people think that architectural firms do, and it's very diverse from, especially, for example, in the housing space. We have a passion and a dedication to affordable housing, and we do luxury single-family homes, the prototypical, if there is such a thing, Montauk home, if you will. And we enjoy cross-pollinating that work. It's difficult to maintain diverse practices. Firms tend to want to specialize, and we understand that. And there are lanes that we don't venture into because it's so specialized. We generally don't work on large-scale medical or medical office space work. We definitely do not work in the public school lane because those firms, who we all know and love well, have a lockdown on that lane of work. But I can't, in terms of other project typologies, we're as diverse as they come.
It seems as if you guys are in a lot of areas that are sort of more architecture adjacent, right? Which is like you're really like a civic partner.
Often, and we really, I like that term, civic partner. We want to be civic partners. We like the notion of partnering in general, right? And that notion can cross-pollinate many lanes. In our traditional practice, we love partnering with the construction side of the formula as opposed to being adversaries or in our own corners.
Yeah.
So that, I mean, there's a common theme across all of our work in that regard, in the partnering regard.
Well, why don't we talk about let's talk about a couple projects that you guys have done.
Yep.
And specifically, so people can get their heads around what we're talking about here.
Yep.
So, one of the projects I really think is incredible is this Olive Opera House that you did in
Yep.
Ossining.
Yep.
So this is as we were talking about earlier, this is a adaptive reuse. Now, did you guys use any scanning technology for this one? How did you document this building?
We did, and it was probably, I mean, it was probably for the scanning consultant one of the most challenging projects they've been involved in. It's an existing 5,000 square foot building in downtown Ossining, and albeit on the surface it seems like, well, it's a simple 2.5-story building that seems fairly prototypical. But the building was carved up into 6 or 7 unique levels, and it had a very unique performance space on the second floor, not the first floor. The building had been modified. It was a pre-turn of the century building that had been severely damaged in an initial fire at the turn of the century, then another fire mid-century, and then another fire in the most recently, and so the building itself has its own spirit and character. It's a survivor.
Sure. Yep.
But subsequent to all of those events and becoming a manufacturing facility during World War II, it had been modified in unsympathetic ways many times. So the project today is not only an adaptive reuse, it's trying to move the building back to what it originally was, which is a community hub, a community performance space.
Right.
It's going to house a component of the Sing Sing Prison Museum initiative. There is a bookstore in there now, in one space now, and that bookstore, which is flourishing, is going to continue in the space. And then there are multi-performance spaces throughout the building. So knitting all of that together in a pre-turn of the century building and bringing it up to current standards in every regard, energy performance, obviously building life safety code, maintaining the character of the building.
Yeah.
Those were all challenges.
Well, yeah. I mean, well, let me know. Let's talk a little bit about that, like for folks that don't really are not necessarily from the industry so much about all this, what people have to think about in terms of like the envelope of an older building, in terms of essentially what I like to think is that old buildings can still be smart buildings.
Yes.
Right. Not all smart buildings need to be new builds, right? So what does it take to make an old building into a smart building?
And we as a profession and as an industry, we're learning. We've learned much over what I would call the initial 40 years of adaptive reuse focus, and in conjunction with the next era of all buildings becoming higher performing in every regard, we've learned more about how to accomplish that in adaptive reuse examples. And certainly this building is one of those examples. But right, you don't want, in all of that initiative, you don't want to polish off the years of character, right?
Of course. Yep.
And this particular project is the family purchased the building in the early 80s. It was always a family artist retreat. And as much as they're excited about breathing new life into the building and bringing much activity and dragging the building into the 21st century, they were mindful of, let's not rub off all of the tactile storylines. So we've been that's been a delicate path. even during the historic review process where, and which occurred locally and at New York State level, not for, we didn't want to bring the exterior masonry back to pristine levels.
Mhm.
The building was a glorious masonry building when it was constructed. During the manufacturing post-war and post-war periods, it had been painted.
Right.
The paint just wore off over decades and decades. And now it's kind of somewhere in between, right? The building
Mhm.
is revealing its original masonry, um, you know, self from the turn of the century, and it's got kind of this mystical faded paint, and we didn't want to go either way. We wanted to maintain, kind of capture where it is today. So that took some convincing, right? Both at many levels, because there's a lot of academic notions that, well, you know, you should choose one. You're returning it back to its original state, or you're going to, you know, capture some other moment in time. And we wanted to maintain the moment of time we're in. Eventually,
Yeah.
that got traction. Everybody got on board with that.
I mean, it's you see it in all these towns, and there are these dedicated spaces that were designed to be the centers of the community, right? Where we have this here
this
in
was
Troy.
one of those.
We have a 4,000 square foot theater here, a 4,000 seat theater right downtown that is basically crumbling and collapsing now. And it's just, you know, it's just it'll probably never get developed. Which is just a shame, because it's like this sort of, it's the heart of the community, and it's hollowed out.
Well, this building probably teetered on that storyline at one point.
Yeah.
You know, especially after the most recent fire. But I have to, you know, let's give credit where credit is due. The family who owns the building, you know, suffered through what and how. Oh my, what are we going to do now? How are we going to do this? How committed can we be? And forged ahead. And it's not easy, right? For a family, not, you know, to foster and shepherd and maintain a building like this. And so they get a lot of credit for that. The fans.
So explain to me a little more about what your job is like, John. Like, it seems like you work with local agencies a lot. You work with different levels of civil literacy. Explain to me what this is a little more.
You mean my career trajectory, or what it is we do here in?
Well, I'm just trying to understand. It seems like, you know, you guys have a pretty large firm, right? It's a medium-sized firm.
Really, no, we are not. We are not you know, depends on how you categorize large firms. The AIA would say, I think anything over 15 or 20, and we're below that, right? So we're small. We're larger than a 2 or 3 person operation, but we're not 20 people, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you know, I think if you polled my partners, we would all have different visions of where we want to be and where we are. But
Yeah.
you know, I still think of us as a relatively small boutique firm, right? Some of us don't like the word boutique. I struggle with it sometimes, but
yeah. Well, I guess I suppose there's all different sizes of communities. I mean, but you are, you know, you're getting involved in a lot smaller communities like Austin.
Yeah. Yeah, generally, yes. I mean, if you consider, but we have a lot of work in Yonkers, and, you know, Yonkers in New York State, you know, it's considered a larger city, believe it or not.
Right.
We do work in New Rochelle, White Plains. In many areas of upstate New York, those would be large cities. So we have a unique fabric here in Westchester. We have this fabric of very small communities. In many instances, they feel and look rural, and they are to a degree, but it's still unique. Westchester is a very unique place to practice.
Right. Yeah.
but we consider ourselves a Hudson Valley firm. We practice up and down the Hudson Valley, and you know, we don't venture into the 5 boroughs often, but
Right.
we have done and would continue to do work in the city. We've done work out on Long Island, Connecticut.
Yep.
We're a small, relatively small regional footprint. We've done work in South Carolina. We would probably are going to do work in Florida at some point.
Right. So what's one aspect of your approach that hasn't changed at all, even as the tools and clients have evolved for you?
I mean, I'll go back to the partnering notion, right? I have never, you want to promote dialogue, you want to partner with people, whether it's a client or a consultant or a community or a construction professional.
Yep.
And because, you know, collectively the process is always better than you know, everyone siloed and individuals running around trying to make it all mesh. And
Right.
you know, that's a scalable, that notion or that mission is scalable. And sometimes it's required anyway, right? And when you think about large planning initiatives, you've got to lead, you've got to be part of a greater whole.
Mm-hmm.
The notion of planning is that. But even in smaller projects, whether it's a small residential project, right, you still want to be in a partnering dynamic. And we like where I think, you know, traditionally, not so much in this area, but you know, the client and the design professionals create a project, and then you approach the municipality, right? Whether it's permitting or whatever other a level of approval is required.
Mm-hmm.
We think there is a better path to, you know, and it's about partnering with the community sooner than later, right? Not
Right.
showing up the door with your drawings in a roll going, we need a permit, right? Give us a
Right.
permit.
So let's talk about that a little bit. What's one assumption in zoning or land use that you routinely find yourself challenging?
Well, every day is in our footprint. It's routinely is every day. So let me just share some facts, right? In this county, in Westchester County, there are 43 different planning entities, community planning, 43, right? Not counting the county planning board.
Right.
If I haven't done the research. I'm sure Orange County, California, there are other places that have the density of planning, of home rule. You've heard the term home rule. Every community here wants to be in the home, and so that is both unique, it's dense, and it's challenging, because virtually everywhere you practice in one small community and you go to the next, it's a whole, they're unique challenges, right? The zoning is unique. The building department dynamics are unique. So it seems, you know, the obvious.
I would imagine there's a lot of times you have to scale down a community's vision because of all these constraints. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And you know, where I feel like, so depending on what side of the table we're on, whether we're on the private side representing a client and an application to a community, or we're on the community consulting side, right?
Yeah.
Where that participation may be on broader global planning notions about what best serves your interest, finding your way to where you want to be. How do you interface in that planning process? How can you improve those dynamics? Or a project that has reached an impasse with the community, typically a larger project. And I don't know how to describe ourselves other than intermediaries, right? Ambassadors for both sides of the table. We've been in that role. We are currently in that role in a couple of instances. Because reaching an impasse, whether you're on the developer side or the community side, that's doing no one any good. and so trying to bridge that dynamic in an environment, in a region where the planning and the land use hurdles are so dense.
Do you have any idea how we can change the momentum here so these local agencies are not just regulators, but they're actually becoming collaborators in innovation?
I don't have a lightning bolt. But needless to say, that is a common topic, right? It's a common topic on the land use development side. It believe it or not, it's a common topic on the community side, on the municipal side. But it's more challenged in terms of how that's refined, or how that is more accommodating in a more efficient way to get better results, right? Because I think in the end, the frustration for everyone is that there are all these layers and they don't overtly appear to contribute to better results.
Right.
They make the process excruciating. They add expense beyond anyone could possibly imagine in other areas of the country. It's one of the hurdles we will never reach affordable housing in our region. We can never achieve it with the layers of land use management that is encountered. And that's not condemning the noble notion that communities want to facilitate. It's just gone wrong. It's unsustainable.
Yeah. Well, actually, you had I think you guys were involved in suggesting an interesting form of adaptive reuse, which was about repurposing suburban office parks.
Well, that is not unique to us, right? That has been a trend. So concurrent with suburban office park occupancy rates falling, not just in this region, all over the country, not profound for fairly obvious reasons. COVID lent to that, accelerated that exponentially. But the suburban office park model has to evolve, right? It's a use and typology that doesn't have much of a future, and they typically are large land consumers in every community, whatever community they're in. They've become the tax base, the dependable tax base that they once were, doesn't exist anymore. Annually, these property owners are refiling tax certiorari's because they don't have the income. You can't tax them like these. So anyway, it leads to the obvious next generation solutions, which what do we do with these? How do we merge all of the challenges communities are facing? Housing, open space, recreation, taxes. Often it's tough to say, well, you can introduce mixed use and retail in these in an obvious way. And the first argument is, well, our downtowns are struggling already. Why would we want to siphon off or add to that inventory? The answer is, more often than not, what's missing is strategic retail. And these office parks are typically out away from downtowns, but they're in residential footprints that have gravity, and where you can create a more localized retail experience that's both for a resident who's now living on these mixed-use properties, but neighborhoods that would typically have to go 15 or 20 minutes to any food or retail service now are 5 minutes away, maybe even walkable. That's the supporting land use logic. And there are a lot of terrific examples right around the country. They're slowly coming to fruition in the Hudson Valley. So, you know, we're in that space.
Well, that's good. Well, I really wish we could talk about this longer. I mean, to me, I guess. So, what does practicing forward mean to you for Nexus in terms of, you know, where you see policy or culture resisting change over the next 5-10 years?
So there's hope. As I mentioned, part of our trajectory through this private municipal engagement consulting role started in a more academic environment 10 or 15 years ago, almost 15 years ago. And what we've seen, and it was an educational process, right? It was case studies where we would be at Pace Land Use Law Center, and communities would be invited in, and it would be a mixture of elected officials and staff and et cetera, and a few stakeholders. And you would sort of school them in an academic way or educate them in an academic way. That has evolved. That's evolved to the point where it's more of communities bringing in real world case studies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the process of how do you as a community best activate a project like this to meet your goals and desires and to support sound business development along with your expanding your tax base. And then take those and create real world projects. That's beginning to occur.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know how. I mean, and this is very limited so far, right? These are very limited examples, but I do see that process growing. It has to, right? It can't be what the last 30 years have been. There's got to be a new path forward for the municipal side and the private side. And
I mean, I know very little about it, but it just seems like it's become almost absurdly restrictive.
Well, it not become it. Yeah, it is. It has been.
Yeah,
And continues to be.
I mean, it just blows my mind when I visit a place like China or something, and I see how quickly
Right.
building entire cities in 5 years, and
Yeah,
just.
we don't. I mean, I'm not suggesting or inferring or lobbying for unbridled development, although
Sure.
our profession would benefit to a greater degree. But there's a balance somewhere, and
Yeah.
we've got to find that balance for a whole lot of reasons. And there are slow needle movers or slow initiatives that are moving the needle that I'm encouraged about. We're encouraged about. I think some communities are encouraged about, but we got a long way to go. And full disclosure, those of many people who know me know that I sat on my community planning board for 26 years.
Right.
I think that all of the applicants who came to our board and knew me knew that I was there to bridge that process. I wasn't there to be a part of the layers of resistance and pushback. It was there to help bridge the process. And there are land use boards where I have colleagues and a network that are doing the same thing. But it's a challenge.
Yeah. Well, listen, I don't really personally, I don't understand really that much about how technology influences planning, but I do have some idea how it
You do, because that's your business. You're in that.
I know how it influences architecture and design. I suppose it does influence planning as well. But we're here to talk about you today, John. So, what do you think are some new technologies that you're either excited to adopt in the future, or are you nervous about disrupting everything in your industry?
Well, you've mentioned the BIM world, and there are a lot of components to that that are very exciting and support that, and have created where we are and building information management, and that's exciting. It promotes better work. It promotes better projects. It tends to expedite the time. It's more cost efficient, or but it has been proven to be more cost efficient. And yet again, it provides a layer of tools for all of us on the design side to be better at it, what we do. The elephant in the room is obviously AI, right? And I am of a generation and age where it is a little unnerving. And I think that's just generational. My partners are much younger than I look at them and I go, I am glad I can see the end of the road for me, and where I'm not so dependent or reliant or involved in what the glory of AI may or may not bring. But clearly we as a firm, and I think many firms, are learning, just at the beginning of learning how to harness it in a productive and meaningful way.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like yet. I can say we've had moments all over the place here collectively as a firm where we've test fit various aspects and various scales of AI, and there have been moments when we all step back and go, wow. And then there are moments where we've all stepped back and giggled.
Yeah.
And so we're somewhere in between. But we've started to harness it in a meaningful way, I think.
What are you guys using AI for in your firm?
Well, we're still at a point where we will create a Revit, what we call test fit, right? It's a conceptual study. It's a conceptual planning study, for example, and we'll
be for a new build. So this is a model for a new build construction.
Yes, but it's a very abstract model where we will input the zoning constraints and some of the planning constraints into an abstract model, and then we'll begin to layer in different themes, right? Of aesthetics or community planning goals, or contextual realities, and start to see what avenues it takes us down.
Sure. I suppose there's so many different layers you could use to simulate design in that regard. Because as we've been discussing, a big part of your job is just juggling all these multiple overlapping constraints.
Yes.
Right. So if you could model all those constraints, that's very interesting. But it's interesting to think that design becomes generative just based on these regulatory constraints, which is kind of a depressing idea, frankly, as a designer.
It is, but that's always been the reality, right? Long before AI. I mean, even it's always been a reality that at some level, even in the least regulated areas of our country, there have been aspects that model what built environment became.
Interesting. Wow. Okay. So you guys have used some AI tools to do actually, is it actually prototyping in Revit?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
See, we've had those wow moments, and like I said, the wow moments are both. It can be conflicting, right? As a professional.
First of all, I don't use any AI whatsoever in my operational pipeline. I have been using it to help me more with administrative and sales and marketing tasks. But I haven't really involved in the operational pipeline because, our tolerances are very, very tight. And the only thing that can be done really is to do it entirely manually at this point. But
it's got to be learning what it is and how you're doing it and getting ahead for you, I would think.
No, I haven't really gone there, but we do have, what's interesting about ScandaPlan is we have a massive library of point clouds and models. So I was thinking that it's an incredible archive to use to actually train an AI on
Yeah.
how to actually model things, because very few people have such a massive library of Revit models and point clouds as our company does. So
It's just waiting for you to do that. You don't know it yet.
yeah, it's true. But you know, in our company, in our production pipeline, we rely on what's called computer vision and machine learning. These applications are not, I differentiate them from AI because they're not like what you would have in an LLM, which is just sort of this hallucinating entity that's trying to, you know, be creative within constraints like you're talking about.
Yes.
Our thing is the opposite of that. We're trying to eliminate any kind of subjectivity or creativity and really drill everything down to incredibly precise accuracy.
Yeah. But in that regard, it's what it's what you have always tried to do, right? And whether before AI you were trying to do that, now it's a tool to help you perhaps
Sure. Yeah.
better. And the same for us, right? We've always kind of sketched over and explored, well, what if we did this, or what if the aesthetic theme was this? Now we just have a tool that's faster at
Well,
it.
that's pretty interesting. I never thought of that as a creative design tool that would have total awareness of all different regulatory constraints. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't listen. I'm not here to say that it is that tool yet.
Sure.
Right. We are partnering with that tool.
Okay.
Partnering word. Steering it around, and it's learning.
Is that something is that something you can buy off the shelf, or is that something?
Yeah, we've done both. We're in both lanes. We're still test fitting a product that was free, and we're test fitting a product that we purchased to try to compare as we as we grow and advance in this.
Interesting.
So far, I will say this: there's not a lot of distance between the two so far, right? But we're very, I mean, for us anyway, we're very early into this.
That's fascinating. Well, I would look forward to checking in with you and keep me posted on how things are going. I think that's all the time we have for today, John. Really glad you could join me on the cast. And once again, this is John Fry. He's the principal at Nexus Creative Architecture, Planning, and Design. And we've had a chance to talk about architecture, planning, and design today. Thank you so much for illuminating me a little bit about what goes on in this world of community building and partnering with civic responsibilities.
And for having me, and and the notion that we're partnering with lots of people in our, like you, in our project paths.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I look forward to working with you on a project in the future. So once again, I'm V. Owen Bush, sponsored by ScandaPlan. We're the measure of excellence for architects and engineers. And we'll see you on the next podcast. Check out John Fry at Nexus Creative Design. Thanks, everybody. Cheers.